we are covering the whole concept of returning to work after a cancer journey. Now, returning to work brings up so many different emotions. And this is for even if you're thinking about returning to work and what we've comprised, it's a bit of a milestone, really, for everybody, and whatever that means now, because everything looks different, and that's where we come in at, and all what underpins all of these sessions is that the most important relationship we'll ever have is the one we have with ourselves, bar none. So it's really crucially important that we acknowledge it and we start to nurture it. And going back to work is a really big part of that journey. So today we'll cover 5 different areas to think about when you're starting to prepare yourself for the workforce and just get a little bit curious about different things. We'll talk about some things that could come up for you. It might not. But again, it's another milestone. And after having walked cancer path, it can bring up a whole lot of stuff. And this is a great thing because, it brings it up to be healed. So whether you are starting a new position or haven't started looking for a new position or you're just thinking about it, these 5 different steps will be really helpful in helping you with that, making that transition a little bit smoother. And the intention is really just to help you feel a little bit more confident than you will in half an hour than you do now, and just build some confidence in the transition and also carrying a really massive amount of compassion and grace for the journey that you've been through or possibly still going through. We don't want to bypass this healing stuff as much as we sometimes wish we could. It's not a linear journey and everybody's healing time frame is really different, and often it can be, 2 steps forward and 1 step back at times. So that said, there's 5 areas we'll cover today. And the first one is a solid self-care plan. Now, you might have I do a session on this stuff here, so this is a more sort of condensed version, but as I always say, a solid self-care plan is really the foundation of building a happy and fulfilled and purpose-led life, particularly after a cancer journey. And consistent self-care, it does build that confidence in the mind and the body, which we can be pretty disconnected from at this point in time. So self-care is made up of 2 components. So self-discipline and habit stacking. Now, self-discipline is probably the biggest form of self-care there is because, and it does not mean to sound harsh, self-discipline, it's loving yourself enough to do the things that make you feel like the best version of yourself unapologetically. And I'll say that again. Self-discipline means loving yourself enough to do the things that make you feel like the best version of yourself. And we're already disciplined about lots of things when you think about it, turning up to work on time, making appointments, brushing our teeth, cleaning the toilet, making the bed, all those things. And the self-care, we need to prioritize it just as much. And it's a practice, particularly like if many people, you aren't used to consciously caring for the self. It's not something we think about unusually until we kind of have to. And so self-discipline is committing to the self-care, and then we're going to put habits in place to be able to be really consistent with it. So habit stacking, that's essentially taking a habit that you've already got and stacking the new one you want on top of it. So really easy example, supplements. I don't know about you, but I can have a lot of really pretty bottles of very expensive supplements sitting on my cupboard, not even opened, or I maybe took 2. So if there's something that you want to be serious and consistent about, I go, right, I'm going to stack my supplement on top of brushing my teeth. So I set myself up. So every time I brush my teeth, the supplements are sitting right next to the toothbrush with a glass of water. So that's a really basic example. Another one is if I really wanted to get into some more higher learning or podcasting, I never have time. If I'm in the car and the kids are loud, it's pretty hard. So if I go on my walk, even for 10 minutes, I'm moving my body and I've got my podcast on at the same time. So it's stacking those habits so you can tick those boxes. And having this self-care plan set up prior to a return for work when there is less time, let's be honest, that will help make that transition a lot smoother. So a self-care plan, we divide that up into 3 different parts. So physical care, head space care, and heart space care. And the idea is when we choose something every day from each of these sections, we have that holistic view of caring for the self. So we're doing something physical care, And again, there's just start to get curious about each of these areas. So physical care is movement, it's physiotherapy, it's nutrition, hydration, supplementation, caring for the physical body. And again, it's important to remember that this can sometimes be two steps forward and one step back. Um, Fitting movement in again. Do I need physio? And not arguing with yourself about if you do need, if that sort of thing could be of benefit. And starting to book those things in so we can physically start to feel stronger. And then headspace care. That is the therapy, the coaching, listening to podcasting, reading, higher learning. So it's caring for the mind. And all of these are really connected, as you can see. So it's being really honest or getting curious. Am I carrying a lot of fear around this? Am I feeling really quite traumatized about what's happened? Do I just need a really good sleep every night? Or what do I need? And being really honest with yourself about that. When I talk about therapy and things, it's not committing to 2 hours a week for the rest of your life, unless that's what you want. It's going, okay, I could probably do with some help around this issue or this issue, and just to try to heal that. And there is nothing like a cancer journey that will deliver this stuff up to you on a lovely silver platter for you to face head on. So that's the headspace care. Heart space care is caring for the soul and the spirit, which is it was my favorite one. I'd care for my spirit all day if I was allowed to, but it's the meditation and the mindfulness. Essentially, it's a spiritual connection of your own understanding, whatever that means for you. So it's getting curious about, well, what is my connection? And it's really connection with the self. That can feel really disconnected a lot of the time. Am I curious about learning more mindfulness? Am I curious about meditation? What is going to make my spirit and my soul feel better and feel calm? And all of this is really about trying to regulate the nervous system. If we choose something from our physical care every day to care for the body, something to care for our head space, and something to care for our heart space, that does become this habit. And that way we are calming the nervous system and regulating the nervous system as much as we can. Because feeling good needs to be our baseline way of being. And that does take some effort. It's a birthright. We need to feel good for the most part. And then when life does this and life does this, we're in a better position to cope and come back to balance. So just start to get curious about different things. And I love this part. I've heard so many great stories. There's one, I do these classes for Australia as well. And there's one lady who she got so into line dancing. I'm not joking. It was her dream, and she's in the outback of Australia and she wanted to do line dancing. And that was her jam, and she was so into it. And that was basically all of her self-care. And so there's just so many things to get curious about. And what do I want? What do I like? What's going to feel good? We're not punishing the body. We're trying to love the body. If it feels like you're punishing yourself, it's not the right answer. It's feeling what feels good. So that is in a nutshell a self-care plan, and that is so crucial to have in place before we think about going back to work, because that can, as I said, we go back to work, there is less time, there's much more demands, our head's in different places again, which is great. But again, we need to maintain this so we don't feel like we're just chasing our tail the whole time. So step 2 is controlling your narrative. You get to take control of your narrative and your communications around this. So take some time to decide what you want people at work to know, whether it's colleagues that you already have or if you're going into a new team. You're not legally obligated to disclose anything, by the way. So you choose what you want them to know. Whether you feel fine about talking about things, whether you don't want to say anything and you'd rather shelve it and move on. You actually get to choose that. So it's being really clear with yourself about what am I comfortable with people knowing, and then having a statement ready and we'll talk about this in step 5, but some people don't know what to say, so they might come out and ask you straight up, how am I going to handle that if somebody says something or asks me a question? Just having a statement ready that's a blanket statement if you're not comfortable talking about everything that's happened. And again, you're not obligated to tell anyone anything. So you get to choose what you want management, colleagues, team to know. And setting up a meeting with the appropriate person or people prior to going back to help them understand you can communicate your needs, what you're comfortable with people knowing, and any support that you need. Now, it's really important to remember people really appreciate solutions. They really, really appreciate solutions. So, and being told how they can support you. So, if you take some time to go, right, what do I want? Do I want to do a gradual return? Can I do that? Can I do some hours from home? Work out what you need. Am I in a position where getting up early is good for me now? Do I want to work earlier in the day? Can I split my hours? What do I want? And this might take a little bit of trial and error, to be fair, because you're going to have days where you might feel worse than other days, as we know. And but if you come with a solution to the people concerned, they'll really, really appreciate it. And you'll probably find they'll bend over backwards to accommodate what you need to come back into the workforce. So work out what you want and make that the starting point. So what I want, my ideal situation, is that going to be I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday mornings, and then I can go and crash for a couple of days? Or what do I want? What will work for me? And again, while you're at it, it's getting really curious about the whole thing. And as I said, this can bring up so many different things. What do I like in my job? You know, what don't I like? What do I want to achieve? Is it enough for me just being back, making some money, getting back into the game of life and the scheme of things? Is that enough for me? And if it is, that's great. Do I want retraining? Do I feel like I'm ready to actually go and do some education or I need retraining? Do I want a complete career change? Is it time that I can go, do you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go and do this. Um, and how has the cancer journey impacted what I want? And asking those questions is really great because you're not bypassing what's just happened or what is still happening. You go, how has this impacted what I actually want? And that will be a different answer for everybody. And there's no wrong answer. And I don't know is a really, really valid response. If you don't have to know the answers to all of this today. It's just starting to get curious about what that might be. So then it's time it's also a great part to analyze your belief systems. What do I believe? What do I believe about my career? What do I believe about my cancer journey? How do I feel different? Am I good and I'm fine and I just want to move past this and get back into, my job and moving forward? Great. Or has this really cracked me open and I'm kind of wanting to let some light shine in on those parts at the moment and take a second to work out what it is that I really want? And in adult life, it's not often we stop and go, what do I want? What do I even like? Where do I like to go? What do I like to eat? Who do I like to be around? And it's a great time just to start to get curious about really getting to know the self. And there's no wrong answers. You meet yourself right where you're at right now. Even things like if you've been brought up on a certain religious beliefs or things, how's that sitting with me now? Do I even believe that? Yes, great. Do I want to lean into that? Whose voice am I listening to? That's another really important one to think about when we go, oh, I should be going back to work and I should be feeling this way and I should be further on past this, but here I am, I'm so stuck. Whose voice is that? Is it mine or is it a parent's? Is it a partner? Is it really well-meaning friends or family that are giving me this advice that is obviously really well-meaning, but until you've sat here and walked it, you can't comprehend it. So you get to choose what you believe, and I love that. It's, belief is just a thought we keep thinking, and that's it. It's all a belief is about anything, is a thought we think on repeat. And that's really cool because you get to choose to change it whenever you want, and if anyone around you has issue with it, it's usually because they are kind of fearful of losing this version of you that keeps them feeling really safe. So don't be afraid to change your belief systems or choose new ones or choosing your narrative. It is all up to you. And when we do start to get curious and gain a bit of clarity, we can feel more in control. And it actually really helps with managing fear around this whole thing potentially happening again or it's a really great way of helping with fear management and things like that. So that's an important one to remember too. And again, it's not an overnight decision. It is something to ponder over time, but it's those sorts of questions to start asking yourself and getting curious about, and being really honest about and making decisions from there. The next one is awareness of limitations. So, just to know and understand any physical and emotional, mental limitations that you might have, both short term and long term. So, things like fatigue and neuropathy and chemo brain, and they're all very, very real things. And this is not about planning to fail or trying to create, anxiety over everything that's happened. It's kind of the opposite. It's just being really aware of those things so that you can have the support in place in advance. So potentially having your person in the workplace that you can even have a code word with. If something is suddenly overwhelming, you're feeling really limited, or it's something you didn't realize was going to be a limitation, all of a sudden that can come up. You can have your code word with your person and just say, code yellow, code red, and they know, and that you could go, take a second, regroup, and know that things are going to be covered confidentially too. No, it doesn't need to be this whole big thing that everybody, oh my gosh, she's taken off, he's taken off, and it's this big drama. It's just taking a minute is actually fine. And if you think about it, if anybody you're around or working with is going through something, whether it's this or I don't know, a breakup or a health crisis or whatever it is, you'd have no qualms with them having a hard day and taking a second. So take a minute just to note down what are your limitations. I know, for example, mine, neuropathy, it's still a thing. And so I know that, just gonna drop stuff all the time and people can laugh at me and I'm great with that. But it's just getting used to understanding what yours is. And is there any fear around my limitations? Just sitting with that too, and just naming the feelings. I feel stuck. I feel, is it that? Do I feel scared? No. Do I feel sad? Yeah, that's it today. It's going through all of them. It's something I teach my kids. It's like, how is this? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling guilty? Am I feeling fearful? What is it there? And honestly, sometimes naming it can be all you need to start freeing it around the limitations. So understanding those is really important. And sort of what support that you might need around that. Next, I'll pause here. Would anyone like to add anything? Has anybody had any experience so far with, exploring returning into the workplace, or things that you have found helpful or difficult? Or please feel free to either unmute yourself or pop into the chat box. Was you listening to me the whole time?
I just all of a sudden feel that I don't have the confidence anymore like I used to.
Yeah.
And so the thought of going back to my job, which is being held for me,
Yeah.
is really scary.
Mm.
And it's how do you get that? How do you grow that confidence before you actually go to the job?
Mm. That's a great question, a really valid point. I think confidence comes from honoring the commitments we make to ourselves. So, and as you say, acknowledging the fear. It can be really scary because you're new. That it is the newness of, well, I'm new now. So what if I stuff up what I was able to do with my eyes closed, however
Yeah,
long
yeah.
ago it was, and people can have a lot of, you need to have a lot of self-compassion for that stuff. As soon as you can do hard things, you've just done a really, really hard thing and you didn't have a choice. So this will be, again, it's because you're new and you're cracked open. And so it's going back into those routines and just having enough compassion for yourself to let yourself make mistakes and let yourself have some time to catch up with what it was that you did before. And it will. It's consistency of showing up, consistency of self-care that will start to have the grow confidence again, and thinking about the things that we can control. We can make sure, and this will be my next point, is taking charge of your long-term care plan. So you have appointments in place, you have your care plan in place. So when you start to go back to work, you can think about, well, I'm just going to take it one day at a time. And if you've thought about how I want to return, And I wonder if sometimes the fear can be not as much about can I still do that, is the thought of going from going through treatment to going back to a full-time all day, every day and having to rock it along at the same level that you did before. That can be where the fear lies. So having a gradual return can be really helpful. And as you go on, the confidence will start to grow back again. Because if you're honoring the commitments to yourself around self-care, and cutting yourself some slack, and just turning up, telling the right people, acknowledging when you're having a really hard time, and acknowledging what those feelings are, um, and just taking a second to do that, the confidence will come back slowly. And again, knowing if there's things, do I need retraining in something?
Mm,
Letting people help. People love to be able to help, and that will be my next point as well. People, you're giving them a gift of being able to help you or help you retrain or get back to where you were at work. If you think about it, if somebody came to you in their vulnerable time and said, I'd really appreciate a hand with this, you would do it with open arms, right? And you would give them love and wrap yourself around them and help them get back to where they were. And so when we let people do that, we're actually really giving them a gift of being able to demonstrate humanity and humanness. It's just more challenging when you're being on the vulnerable end than
mm.
the receiving end. And it's learning to receive too. Often we can struggle with learning to receive. We think, I should be better. I should be exactly how I was before. But giving them the gift of being able to help you, that will grow the confidence back as well. It can be really scary. But as I said, you've just done something really hard and didn't have a choice. And so this is something that you do know how to do, and it will come back with giving yourself other people the gift of being able to help you and having compassion for yourself that you can do hard things and just giving yourself a chance to get back in there again. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for asking. Would anyone else like to say
Uh,
anything?
yeah, I would. I just finding what you're saying really doesn't apply to my situation because
Yep.
I'm in between a job and I need to
Yep.
find a job. So I've
Yep.
no, my thing is fear of having absolutely no confidence for an interview. I know what I don't want, but I'm not going to go in and tell anybody about my cancer journey.
Yep.
It's, because I don't know where I'm
No.
going to be.
Fair. And you don't have to tell anybody about your cancer journey at all. I think it's for you, if you're between jobs, it's taking this opportunity to get curious about what you do want. I mean, I can rattle off what I don't want over everything. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
again, we haven't often taken the time to go, what do I want? I know what I don't want, but what
yeah,
do I want now? And just using that as the start point to start putting feelers out. And you don't have to tell anybody about your cancer journey whatsoever. But again, it is, and maybe there is a career counselor that would be great for you in your position between jobs. A career counselor or a career coach could be great because they can take you through a journey of asking you the right questions so that you can come up with understanding what you do really want to do and getting your skill set packaged up and pointing you in the right direction of where to take it. The second to last thing I've got is taking charge of your long-term career plan. So, a key way of helping manage fear and anxiety is booking in as many appointments as you can in advance. So, scans, checkups, bloods, mammograms, colonoscopies, having those in the calendar, as many as you can and far in advance as you can, is really, really key. So, and don't forget the nice stuff, the nice things on your care plan, whether it's the energy work or the work that supports your mental health and heart space long term, having that in the calendar is really, really important. So just again, it's getting curious about what are the things I need to schedule, how often do I do that, and just getting those booked in as often as you can. And lastly, preparing for humans being human. We've sort of touched on this through this session, but people often don't know what to do in these perceived difficult situations. There could be a comment made that could be triggering or activating, as we like to say, or even offensive, and sometimes when people say nothing at all and avoid the topic, it can feel more offensive as well. So That sensation of being suddenly overwhelmed and emotional is really, really normal. And it can come in to be that intense, that realization that everybody's life has moved on and yours feels fundamentally changed. So having a plan in place for those random hard days is really important. You know, as I said earlier, a code word with somebody that you trust, meaning you can just disappear if you need to. And as I said, people generally love to help. They love to be needed, and they just often need some direction. So that's, I'll just answer this question. Same role, absolutely. I think this seems to be something coming up here is that people that are between roles or want a complete change, where do I start? And that's a really valid question, guys. So I will forward through the name of the career counsellor that I know that can go through this process with you. And I think, as I said, in preparation for that too, it's having these things in place already is going to make that process a little bit easier because you're caring for the self first. So any extra stress and nerves that are coming on with potentially being interviewed or deciding what I want next. And just having a think about what it is that your skill set that you do have. And you've probably gained a whole lot more resilience and skill set through this whole journey as well. And again, you can know that and own that without having to tell anybody about it if you're not comfortable. So I'll just do a quick recap here. So the 5 areas is self-care plan. I know I bang on about it constantly. Having that in place, having your little menu of things that you can choose from that is going to make you feel good. Controlling your narrative is number 2. Deciding what you are and you aren't comfortable talking about, and starting to ask yourself, you know, your belief systems about this whole thing. What do I like? What I don't like? What I want to achieve? What I don't need to achieve? Am I wanting a change? How has this impacted what I want? Those questions. Awareness of your limitations and having a plan in place to manage those going forward. And taking charge of your long-term care plan. Again, this is a really great way of, on my website, I've got a free pop-up. It's a whole little ebook about managing the fear about cancer returning. But having your long-term care plan in place is a really great way of managing fear before it happens because you're on top of everything. And preparing for humans being human, you know, sometimes they're having a couple of statements or things that you can say if anything is asked of you or said to you that makes you uncomfortable. And again, giving people the gift, if you're comfortable with that too, of helping you if you need to in the workplace. It's people often need direction because they don't know what to say. So we have rocketed through that, everybody. I will pass on to Christine the names of the 2 career coach counselors that will be really great if anybody would like to get in touch with one of those and make an appointment. And they can help navigate you through that process of what do I want to do now? Again, as Esther brought up, I'm overqualified for this position. I'm overqualified for what I actually want to do. How do I navigate that without having to bring up what's just happened? And have you feeling really good and really comfortable going back into the workforce. And just the key thing is have so much compassion for yourself because it's a big change and it's a big transition, which can bring that, but it can also bring a great sense of normalcy as well and healing. Would anyone else like to add anything before we finish?
I just add something quickly along those lines of a career advisor, that occupational therapists are also really helpful in the returning to workspace. And in previous roles I've worked for ACC and getting people back to work. And if what I've had with a few people is they may have had injuries at the same time. And if you can double dip and get someone to support, because they can also facilitate those first meetings with your employer and just make it a really gentle, easier way to approach it.
Yeah.
And the other only practical thing that I'd suggest for people is sometimes we build it up in our mind, the return, that it makes us even more anxious. But even just going in there and having a cup of tea at the workplace first, or just those gentle little meetings with them before you're even thinking about returning, is a way of still engaging with work and not building it up to this really insurmountable sort of thing.
It's one whole day that happens. It's the before and the after. And yeah, absolutely. You're popping in for a cup of tea and visiting people is a great way of breaking the ice. You're right.
Yeah.
Really great way of breaking the ice. Go. Well, thank you guys all very much for coming along today. I hope there was a couple of nuggets in there that was helpful for you, and that would help to sort of start to navigate this new bridging the gap. And I wish everybody all the very best. I have got another session coming up on a different topic in about 10 or 12 weeks time with Look Good Feel Better, but we'll put that up on the Instagram before that comes. So it would be lovely to see you all again. But otherwise, I wish everyone the very best navigating this transition. And I send all my love, and I would love to hear how everybody's going.